how do you go from having 20 people in the same location when it comes to the sales organization to 100 salespeople across 7 locations?
Expanding the business in so many different countries at the same time. So how do you get starting in this?
So I think that the biggest thing is any organization is looking to actually grow and actually scale across several territories, defining clear expectation early on.
I want to circle back to resetting the expectations to the sales team.
It wasn't so much around the people that were performing or had developed some good habits. It was rather the people that were maybe underperforming or just not having being ramped up properly and still not delivering. The best part of my role now being with Payhawk for over a year and a half is...
So today we're talking to Jérémie Trouillet, VP Sales at the one and only Bulgarian unicorn, Payhawk. So Jérémie joined Payhawk in June 2022, just after the impressive Series B extension, making them Bulgaria's first unicorn with a total raise of $225 million. And so I think it's the least that we can say that Jérémie stepped in at a very crucial time, thus with navigating the company through a phase of intense growth and high expectations. And so if you're interested in the dynamics of scaling a company, you're in for a ride, as Jérémie has been sharing his experiences and key results he's achieved at Payhawk. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Jérémie. Bring us back when you started at Payhawk. Like, what was the initial goal, the initial mission that you were hired for? International growth, we can kind of imagine what it entails, but can you maybe put it in the context of Payhawk back then?
Yeah, sure. Payhawk raised an extension of Series B back in March, and this is when I was just in conversation with the business to actually join them. And the overall Series B was led to allow the businesses to expand rapidly across several territories while opening new offices. In 2022, Payhawk expanded in the UK, in the Netherlands, in France, and in the US. And in that scale, in that growth phase, basically, I was hired to basically support the expansion across the different territory. So when I joined the business, there was a very small team in France of about 2 individuals. In the Netherlands, the team has grown drastically and pretty quickly. They were already up to 20 people. And in the US was yet to be open. So it's basically starting from scratch in terms of where we wanted to actually be located and actually assemble and building a team. So basically I was hired to support those 3 initiatives. And that meant different tasks and responsibility when it comes to France is how we could actually hire and build the right team. So there was a lot of recruitment and making sure we were just onboarding the right people and supporting them. So it's all around the training, the enablement program. When Payhawk grew very drastically and very quickly, initially there was very few processes being in place to making sure we were setting up people for success. And over the last 18 months, we've been working hard to making sure we had the proper onboarding program, certification, and also setting clear expectation when we onboard new employees. In the Netherlands, it was a different mission. The team has grown very quickly, but there was some question on whether we had assembled the right team to be able to be successful there. So here was all about just some extent restructuring the team and making sure we could actually set a good foundation, which took a couple of months, but now we're in a very strong position. And in the US, it was just all around assembling a team. So the context where I joined Payhawk, it was extremely aggressive growth across several territories at the same time. So it was hiring while building our processes to make sure we set them up for success, basically.
All right, because how much of processes were there already in place? Because I suppose you already had like decent product market fit if you're raising above 200 million. So what can you share about that?
Well, yeah. I think when it comes to processes, it wasn't so much on product market fit because I think we knew that we had the right product to expand in this market. It was rather, how do you go from having 20 people in the same location when it comes to the sales organization to 100 salespeople across 7 locations? And that's what I meant. From processes, it's how do we recruit? How do we set expectation? How do we enable? How do we train? How do we measure success? So I'm discussing processes when it comes to scaling a sales organization. While we were scaling it, a lot of new tools were being implemented. Implementation of a new CRM, implementing of Salesforce, implementing of Salesloft, implementing of Gong. And when you implement so many tools at the same time, naturally, pace is key and building processes is key as well. So I feel like we were building the track as the train was actually going ahead and moving ahead. So that's basically what I meant, is all around people and all around enablement and empowering the individual. So it wasn't so much on the product. It was more on the people in the sales and scaling a sales organization, basically.
All right, that's interesting. So you have all of those challenges at the same time, while you're actually also expanding the business in so many different countries at the same time. So how do you get starting in this? What were your priorities when you entered Payhawk?
Well, the priority is always the same when you expand in a new territory, is just break through in a new market. And on top of that, I mean, there was clear expectation from a revenue standpoint. So the objective was clear from a revenue standpoint. It was just a matter of executing in all of these different markets. I think we pushed hard and strong in all of these markets. And I think we've also, as we did it, we were evolving and growing in terms of the overall strategy to attract and approach different markets. I think one of the things that we did early on was realizing that a centrally focused marketing team with the expectation to localize some content on the 7 different territories we operate wasn't good enough. And we need to actually switch gear and to be able to actually be specific to the market that we want to actually penetrate and have actually marketing teams on the ground. So that was, as we grew the sales team is also making sure we can replicate the effectiveness of the marketing organization in all the different territory. But assembling 7 different marketing teams just doesn't happen overnight. The same way in the sales organization. I mean, it just takes time. There is markets such as France or the Netherlands or Germany, where hiring is extremely extensive in terms of just finding the right people for the role. So, I mean, it took us time to be able to be in a position where we are now, where each of the office we operate is supported with the right and the same setup when it comes to marketing director, having content manager. They can not just go further and just translating a piece of content, but really localizing it and making it specific for a market. So I think as we grew the sales organization, we also expand on the marketing strategy to be able to make sure we were relevant. And then I think now we're at the stage where we're working on making it even more specific when it comes to the product market fit. We've been investing a significant amount of money and energy when it comes to integrations, developing integration with Oracle. We've been announcing last month that now we are a NetSuite partner. We are on Oracle NetSuite Marketplace. Same for Microsoft Business Central. So we are investing in these, and these are brand names that resonate across Europe. But now we want to go one step further and making sure we are relevant in each of the markets we operate. We're working closely with Datev in Germany to make sure we have a proper integration. We are in discussion with the other European accounting system in a different European country as well. And that's also just getting down to executing in the local market. It's one thing to have a sales team, another to have the right marketing support, and then it's just the localized product market fit with the right integration and ERP system that we are working on. So these are all the initiatives that we're working on, is be able to have a global strategy and a global vision to be called the leader in the spend management, but also being tailoring the messaging, the content, the product, the integration to each of the market we operate.
That's interesting. Can we maybe go over all of the 3 people, processes, and tools, as you mentioned at the beginning, to kind of understand like the transformation that you went through at Payhawk? I'm sure that there are like a couple of use cases, very interesting, very also inspiring or educational for other sales leaders in the community. So when it comes to people, I know that you mentioned like a couple of things, also different needs in different markets. But if you would have to say like this was really one use case in particularly that was super crucial, super impactful for the business, is there one that comes top of mind?
Yes, and we come down to defining clear expectations. I think that's one of the things that we lacked initially when we grew the sales team. Is priority was on recruitment. All eyes on recruitment. Let's build the team as quickly as possible. And I think like many organizations that scale very quickly, I think a lot of us make mistakes along the way. And I think the biggest thing is setting clear expectations. If you think about the different roles we've been expanding over the last 18 months, I mean, these roles are ranging from BDR, account executive with different leveling based on the targeting that we have. So we have different level based on the target market, small business account executive, enterprise account executive. Then you have sales manager, BDR manager, commercial directors. And basically each of those roles didn't have like clear expectations. And when I mean clear expectation, if you're a BDR, it's one thing to say you have a target to generate or book 20 meetings or generate 12 SAL or generate 8,000 euro worth of pipeline. But what do you need to do in order to get there? Well, you need to actually do and generate a certain level of activities on a day-to-day basis. You need to have a number of prospects assigned to you. And I think while the objective and the key was clear in terms of the KPIs and the goal for each of the role, we didn't do a good job in terms of setting proper expectation to what it meant to be able to reach your goal. So I think that the biggest thing that we had to implement afterwards was resetting expectation across the organization and making sure everything was clear on what they had signed up for and what we were expecting from them. I've just talked about the BDR. I think the other one is when it comes to account executive. A lot of organizations are building account executive team with the expectation that the pipeline is going to be built by BDRs. We're going to recruit a bunch of BDR and they're going to fuel your pipeline. Or marketing is going to take care. You're going to get MQL and leads day and night. The reality is when you're expanding into a new market, you might not have the BDR in front of you. You might not have the marketing leads to be able to support it. So when I talk about expectation when it comes to account executive is being crystal clear that pipeline generation remain mission critical and objective number one. And I do believe that we didn't do that initially to set clear expectation that if you're an account executive, an individual contributor, pipeline generation is going to be still your first mission, because I just couldn't rely on the support of BDR that we were still recruiting, onboarding, training, or the marketing support based on just what I said in terms of having a centralized marketing strategy with very hard initially to have an impact on each of the market we operate. So I think that the biggest thing as any organization is looking to actually grow and actually scale across several territory, defining clear expectation early on to be able to actually recruit and hire the right talent, I think is key. And that also means that depending on the stage of the organization, you're basically going to need different profile. When you start from scratch, you need hunters, you need challengers, you need people that are ready to actually start from scratch with nothing. And that's basically what you need. When you're 400, 500, 600 people strong with a well-oiled marketing machine that is generating a predictable number of leads in MQL, you might need different profile. So I think it's realizing early on the type of profile you need based on your stage and defining clear expectation with the people that you're hiring and onboarding based on the reality of your setup as well.
I absolutely love that. Depending on where you are in terms of stage, look at what talents you need to hire. That's strong. Hi guys, I quickly want to let you know that we are doubling down on this podcast, and by so doing, we are looking for the better revenue stories out there. So if you like what you hear, please give it a like or a follow. It is a simple click on a button, but that click would mean the world to us. All right, let's go back. I want to circle back to resetting the expectations to the sales team, because if they have, been in the company, they have performed a certain way, they have their habits, they have their routines. All of a sudden, you say, look, what you're doing today is not giving the output that we were actually expecting. So we have to look back at the inputs, basically the habits, the routines. So I know that's a little bit of change management, but how did you go and approach that concretely?
When you're thinking about these expectations, these processes, it's coming down to documenting them. It's just making sure you're creating documentation processes. And when I'm talking about documentation, when I talked about the activity early on for BDR, it's just making sure that there is an alignment across different steps of the journey of the BDR to make sure we're all on the same page. And that started all the way during the interview process. When you're recruiting for BDR, making sure you set clear expectation that there's going to be activity level expected on a day-to-day basis. The goal here is basically to qualify people out early on. I mean, it's better to be able to be in a 3-stage or 4-stage or 5th-stage interview and realizing that the person is not the right fit based on the expectation that you try to set early on, rather than trying to recruit the person and boarding for 3 months and then realizing that it was a wrong recruitment for the first place. So expectation needs to be set across the entire journey, starting with the people team, starting with the manager, starting with the onboarding, and making sure the message is consistent when you're defining activity and expectations. When you were talking about resetting expectation, it wasn't so much around the people that were performing or had developed some good habits. It was rather the people that were maybe underperforming or just not being ramped up properly and still not delivering. It's just, so when it comes to change management, it's just taking an opportunity to reset expectation, which should have been set from the get-go initially when we hired them. But again, when you scale very quickly and you go from 20 people to 100 in a matter of a couple of months, naturally, I think any organization could actually miss some steps. So when it comes to the people that were underperforming, I wasn't pointing fingers. I was rather challenging us as an organization in terms of what have we done to set them up for success? What sort of expectation have we set with them? What kind of training programs have we set with them? And I think part of the reset was clearly on us as well as an organization to reset and redefine a clear expectation, communing that expectation with the entire sales organization, and then just making sure it was executing. And it was working for some people. Some were able to adjust and actually just go in line with the new expectation. Some didn't. And eventually you ended up parting ways with some of these. So I mean, it is what it is. But when you are resetting expectation, there would be consequences, basically.
That would make sense. You mentioned it's about maybe having a better onboarding from Payhawk side, maybe ramping up also a little bit better. Like, what are then the things that you implemented that were different from the initial approach?
Yeah, so I think it started with, as you say, recruitment and onboarding. I mean, this for me was key to make sure that we had a proper onboarding program to make it a little bit more specific and tailored to each of the country. And I think, in my opinion, for me, the onboarding program is an ongoing piece of work that needs to be iterated over time. As we grew and onboarded different managers, some managers join us from different organizations, which are able to also bring their experience and the feedback to be able to actually tailor the program and the onboarding program even better. I think so. You set expectation, you make sure there's an alignment across the organization, and then you make sure that the team and the manager are executing this and making sure that everyone is clear. The other thing as well that any individual contributor are expecting when it comes to BDR and AE is career path. They want to understand what's the next step. And it's one thing to set clear expectation. The other one is then, what do I need to do in order to progress in my career? And the other thing that I did as well on top of that is just making sure I was providing visibility for a BDR and an account executive is, what kind of expectation do I need to hit to be able to actually be able to grow as an individual? A lot of BDR want to become AE at some point. The biggest question is when, and what do they need to hit in order to be able to do that? So, I mean, this has been one of the initiatives that we've done is just defining an outlying pathway to allow them to actually grow within the organization. It's something that I've done with all the commercial directors. So I've got 7 commercial directors across the different locations, and it's basically an initiative to discuss what sort of expectation and threshold that we need to set in order to actually drive excellence within the organization. And for BDR, it could be that you have to be in a role for at least 12 months, that you have to be consistent in your target eating on a monthly basis. So it's just defining some clear criteria. But you asked me what was the most important thing, as you scale in terms of advice. I think while expectation is a key one for me in order to get this right from the get-go, providing clear pathway and career path for the sales organization is another one that is empowerment. We are seeing that more and more during the interview process that we have for BDR. BDR literally asking a talent acquisition team during the recruitment process is, what's the next step? What's the pathway for me to become an AE? At what point I become an AE? How many months I have to become a BDR? Because during this interview process, you also sometimes are interviewing with BDR that have you promised the world before, and they don't want to fall in this trap again. So they're asking you the right question. What do I need to do? And when can I expect to actually evolve? And it's coming back to the point, setting expectation on us as an organization, what you want to see from them, but also telling them, what do you need to eat in order to progress with your career? And that, I think, is the best part of my role now, being with Payhawk for over a year and a half, is seeing people grow. I've been seeing a couple of BDR, individual contributor becoming BDR manager, or some of our top BDR becoming AE and crushing it in their role, and seeing the career path and people growing within the organization. It's one of my drivers, and it's one of the things that I like to see, people grow.
I can imagine that brings a warm feeling. Is it, though, easy to create such a career path? Because I can imagine a company such as Payhawk, you need to grow super fast, super quickly, though you have uncertainties also. So you may be not sure in what market, we will be able to actually achieve those high targets. Will also the structure, the organization evolve in that same direction? What can you then promise? What could you actually say, it will depend? How did you try to balance that?
You're right. I mean, and that's in the path that I have to allow people to progress. One of the key criteria is it all depends on business needs, because you're highlighting a real point. If there's a market where there's no need for us to grow based on our performance, based on the total addressable market, we shouldn't be setting wrong expectations from the get-go. So again, if you say early on in the process that the evolution of a BDR to join an AE organization is coming down to business needs, that's how you set clear expectations, basically. But at the same time, if you have a strong BDR that has been here for 12 months, performing, eating the numbers, influencing deals, you should promote them. That's what you should do as an organization, because they're ready. And if you don't do that, they'll find a role different, in another place, in another location anyway. So I think it's a fine balance. The other thing as well is I've seen many organizations, and I've done that in this previous role, where Sometimes BDR get promoted too early on, too quickly. After 6 months in the role, they feel that they're ready to go. And I've seen BDRs just failing miserably. And it's usually coming down to the lack of support from the organization. It was too quick, it was with the wrong person. And I've witnessed that many times before. So that's why I think timing is key as well. And expecting that, you won't be promoted within the first 12 months, I don't think it's completely unreasonable. In order to be, familiar with an industry, an ecosystem, sales tools, sales stacks, I don't think it's completely unreasonable to expect the BDR to do that for 12 months. It's, of course, all depend on your sales cycle, the type of product you sell, and type of environment. But I still think 12 months is a reasonable time frame. So back to your point, and the word that I keep on saying is just expectation. If you have a career path plan defined for BDR and account executive, as long as you set expectation and they're clear from the get-go, there shouldn't be no surprise. But it should be a caveat that it should be based on business need.
I think that's a good point. I like how you mentioned multiple times, like expectation management is super key. In my previous conversation on the podcast, I also argued that actually having a strong culture inside the organization is also being very clear in what the expectation is in terms of, behavior, actions, etc. So I don't know if you agree with that, but also at the same time, how do you build and foster like a strong sales culture?
Yeah, I think it's also coming down to the value of the organization and how do you actually build that over time. I think at Payhawk, we spread across many different territories, many different locations. We've opened new location, as I said, like 4 locations last year. And how do you maintain a culture when you grow that fast and you onboard that many people? Just for context, I first heard about Payhawk in January 22. There were 65 employees. When I was approached by the headhunter, the deck mentioned it was only 60 employees, 65, and now we're over 300. So how do you maintain the culture with that pace and that growth? I think one of the ingredients that Payhawk is using is twice a year, they flew everyone from all the locations to Bulgaria to spend a weekend together. We have a winter team building and we have a summer team building. I've joined Payhawk post-COVID, so COVID wasn't a distraction at the time and didn't impact us. But having the ability to do that twice a year, I think it's key. And a lot of organizations are shying away from this for a lot of different reasons. Cost sometimes. When you grow, there's a point where it doesn't make financial benefit to actually just take everyone together. But Payhawk does that. I've been here for like now close to 2 years, and twice a year they flew everyone to Bulgaria to have a team event. And that has nothing to do with work. It's all around how can you foster relationship across so many different locations and departments and offices. And it's part of the culture. That's how you form the culture. It's one thing to have a company deck and things like that, but allowing people to meet and create relationship and building relationship, I think is key. I also think that again, having a strong set of value, I think is key. But I've seen so many organizations with a deck, with values that they don't breathe, that they don't use, that they don't live. I think at Payhawk we live by our values, and that's how we actually allow us to actually work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Like having the buzzwords on the wall, that doesn't cut it. You need to live it.
No, I think that's the thing, and I think people have seen that enough in so many organizations. So I think it's key to go beyond that basically.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree with that. Hi guys, on May 16, 2024, we are hosting the We Are Sales Conference. Our ambition is to make this event Europe's best and largest conference on sales leadership, where we learn, discover, and debate cutting-edge practices by leaders who have been there, done that. Again, May 16, 2024. Make sure to block the date in your calendar. All right, let's go back. But unless you have anything other that you want to share about the people aspect, I would also like to move to processes, because I'm sure that, again, depending on the market, depending at the maturity in those markets, and depending maybe also on the required sales motion in that market, other types of processes. But again, same question as earlier, is there something that pops up top of mind that you think, all right, this is maybe interesting to share?
It's tempting when you raise that much to equip yourself with all the best tools in the world. And when I joined Payhawk, we had been implementing in a matter of very couple of months, just a significant amount of tool. new CRM, new sales enablement, new, Gong just to record call. And again, it's tempting. I mean, when you have the budget, I mean, you can, just implement the best breed in terms of the tools. But realistically, what you realize afterwards is those tools are so powerful that if you want to enable the team properly, that just doesn't happen overnight. So I think my biggest advice when it comes to implementing tools, I would rather be in favor of implementing less, but do it properly. And that's one of the things that I've done early on when I got this role, is just not implement any other tool. I didn't want to spend any more money on implementing more tools. It was rather looking back and say, what do we have already? And how can we make sure we make the most out of it? So I think, again, sometimes and I've seen that with many BDO and AE, sometimes we underestimate how much work is required to be able to master tools such as SalesLoft. SalesLoft is a great tool, but it can do so much. And I think like so many organizations are barely scratching the surface, just using SalesLoft to just send emails. But what about coaching? What about all the additional functionality that lives and breathes in this tool? And it's basically on this, my second advice is when you acquire such a tool, yes, I mean, you can rely on your own team to be able to create some documentation, best practices, but I would advise you to challenge the vendor as well. I mean, these tools are quite expensive. And one of the first things that I done is I went to all the account manager we had for every single one of those tools, and this tool is pretty expensive, so I need to make sure that we're making the most out of it. So challenging the account manager to train the team even further, to schedule some session after hours, open calls to allow them to basically ask questions and basically make the most out of your investment. So my advice is less is more, and making sure you make the most out of every single one of the tools while leveraging the vendors and challenging them. I think now it's the best time ever to challenge every single one of those vendors, because the market is tense. And we talked earlier in the introduction of the call, the interest for businesses to consolidate all of the tools. And I think it's a reality when it comes to sales stack as well. Before there was CRM, and now we have tools that are trying to actually encompass everything. We're seeing that with what Zoom is doing, what SalesLoft is doing, what Outreach is doing. Initially, those guys have created new environment, new industry when it comes to sales enablement for outreach, like creating cadences and allow people to do multi-threading. But now those guys are going way beyond the initial scope of what they were doing and trying to actually consolidate. So the consolidation in the sales stack is already happening. And every one of these companies is trying to do more than what they originally did to be able to, support their customer even further. So I think consolidation is happening as well for the sales stack. So my advice is less is more, and making sure that you make the most out of every single dollar you're investing in these tools. And if at the end of the year when renewal come, if you can't justify why you're still using this tool, well, just think about starting to live without it and then remove it. And that's also what I've done, is just basically getting rid of other tools because we were not making the most out of it.
Yeah, your opinion are very well aligned with leaders that I talk with regularly. We had recently an event, and exactly that came at the table. I mean, consolidation by the sales techs is one thing, but even consolidation by the sales leaders that see 3-4 different techs starting to do the same thing, so they start to consolidate, just go for one, and they double down on that one. And yes, they go a little bit deeper into the features and functionalities of that one. But definitely, that's also something I notice. To circle back to that point of really tools, the tech stack, and everything. Like, if you would have to say, like, those are the 3 top features of tech stacks, and no matter how big or small you are, you should at least consider those, because those are very, are very valuable to Payhawk. Which one would you say people should certainly consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the 3-1 are very straightforward. First one is a strong CRM, whether using Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever. I mean, you need to actually make the right decision early on, because switching from one platform to another is very painful. I mean, we've been through this exercise at Payhawk, and usually there's a lot of question mark on historical data, because the format usually don't add up, and you would be ended up losing some data. So implementing a CRM should be the biggest question and the most important one that you do as early on as possible. And I'm assuming that usually organization won't start with like a big brand and name, and would start with a small one to eventually lead to a larger one. but know that migration is going to be a pain. So I think my advice when it comes to CRM is it's rather to maybe invest on the bigger one to start with to avoid the pain of a migration down the road, because that's going to be a huge distraction. The bigger thing is then all the tools around cadence when it comes to outbound. There's a number of tools being available on the market. I can think of, SalesLoft, Outreach, HubSpot, Lemlist in France. So there's a number of tools being made available. But the choice in picking the right one is going to be key as you grow your outbound motion and making sure that you have the right tool. And that's the key one to be able to empower and enable BDR and account executive in order to actually make the most out of it. And I think the third one is call recording. Whether it's Gong, Outreach, Zoom. Now there's a lot of platforms that get into this space of being able to actually record call. But I think it's one of the biggest area that company needs to invest on as early on as possible. Call recording for me is key for a lot of different aspects. I mean, the first one is coaching, to allow the commercial director, the sales manager to be able to listen to calls and provide feedback if they couldn't join the call in the first place. I think it's key for handover as well. When you're a customer success or an account manager and inherited a new account, to be able to listen to what has been told, what has been sold, what has been said during the sales process, I think it's key. The other thing is product as well. Hearing from prospect, the use case, the product, whether you have this feature or you're lacking this feature yet, being able to actually provide context, I think is key. I've seen so many organizations where a sales guy will go to the product team and say, hey, I need that feature. Why? Because customers are demanding it. It's so much powerful to actually give them a snippet of a call where for 2 or 3 minutes, the customer would explain exactly why they need that and the intention of using it. So I think successful product team would be the one that actually spend time in such a tools to be able to get some context and prioritize product and feature development based on not what the sales guys is screaming about, but what our customer are telling. Being able to link that to actually potential revenue, whether it's due to opportunity being lost or value that we couldn't capture, I think is going to be key to allow them to do so. CRM, outbound tool, and Gong recording call, basically. I think these are the three things that are paramount to the success of any sales organization.
All right. I love that. Thanks for sharing it.
Sure.
I heard also in another podcast that you explained a story of where you had like 30 BDRs that you had to split in 3 different groups that also needed 3 different trainings. Would you mind sharing that story?
I think that was last summer. Again, I think back as the team grew very quickly and drastically, I think I basically took the time to take a step back and trying to understand the actual state of play of our BDR organization. And it was mainly driven by data when it comes to activities. So I was looking at the overall level of activity of all of BDR across several organizations and the output and the outcome from this, which we were at the time measuring in meeting being booked. And realistically, by crunching the data, I realized that we had basically 3 cohorts when it comes to the BDR. We had one cohort that was generating a significant amount of activities. I mean, I'm talking more than 100 calls per day, but booking no or very few meetings. That was the first cohort. There was another cohort that was generating an okay level of activities and had an okay performance. And the third cohort was generating nothing from an activity standpoint. Some meetings were being booked, but there was no activity being logged in the system. And basically, that meant at the time that those 3 cohorts had different needs. And these were across different organizations, different regional offices. So these 3 cohorts were not regional specific. It was across the entire region that we operated. So basically what that meant is those 3 groups needed different things. The group that was generating a lot of activity but wasn't booking any meeting needed clearly some work to do on the messaging, the persona, the account that we're targeting. Clearly, if they could make 100 calls per day but not booking any meeting, something was off with either the messaging, the persona, or the account. So that group was all around, let's review the cadence, let's review the messages, let's review who you're talking to. And clearly, I mean, you realize sometimes that the messages was off. I mean, bear in mind, we're targeting financial department, CFO, finance director, finance manager. So the tailoring of the messaging sometimes was off. Sometimes the persona, they were just targeting the wrong people or the wrong account for that matters. So that group needed basically support when it comes to the messaging and the targeting. The second group that was doing an okay level of activity and an okay conversion rate, the only messages for them is you just need to do more. I mean, if you could double the level of activity, you will double your results. And the messages for these guys was just, you just need to do more. You need to actually manage your time efficiently to be able to generate more activities. So that also came down to time management and making sure you make the most out of the tool that you have. All the topic we talked about, enablement, empowerment, best practice, and things of that nature. And there's a third group. There was a mixture of people that joined us recently or people that have been here for a couple of months. And basically, they were lacking enablement. They were lacking trainings. They didn't know how to make the most out of the tools. And I think it's coming back to sometimes the assumption that, sales loft. I mean, you put people in the cadence and it's pretty straightforward. Well, it might sound straightforward, but if you've never done it before, if no one show you how to do it, well, some of these BDR were basically lost. And for them, it was just set back to basic. Just review all the onboarding and training materials because clearly we have a problem. So I think at the end of the day, it just meant that out of the 30 BDR that we had, the need was different. And again, it wasn't region specific. It was just like we needed to actually approach and support them differently. And for me, the biggest conclusion to that exercise was just we clearly need to get back to basic and onboarding program because clearly we missed some steps. And I think a lot of organizations are significantly spending time and investment on training new joiners on the product. Who are we talking to? What are the pain points we're addressing? What is the value proposition? That's all great and makes sense and it's key part of your onboarding. But what are you doing to enable them and empower them on the process and the tools? Sometimes we just take it for granted. It's Salesforce. Go figure it out.
Yeah, no, and in addition to that, I would even say education on the prospect. Hi, guys. Have you heard anything fascinating yet? If so, please share your learnings on LinkedIn. That way we understand better what you value, but at the same time, you're also providing value to your network. All right, let's get back to the interview. You also mentioned in the preparation that if you would do this again, you would approach the challenge as a funnel, similar to a sales funnel. I don't know if you remember that, but if so, what did you mean by that?
I think the funnel, which would mean that basically I would approach it the same way as I've been approaching deals before. I mean, if you think about a deal, I mean, you do your research, you're preparing ahead of the call, and then you prepare your discovery, you're preparing the value proposition, you're preparing your proposal, you go through a negotiation, and then eventually you land the deal, and then you think about the onboarding and expanding the deal. I think if I had to do it again, I would basically take like a couple of weeks initially to basically assess everything that we needed to fix as an organization and basically approach it as a funnel when it comes to the entire sales organization, which is preparation. So what do we do in terms of making sure we're attracting the right people, having a proper sales competency framework in terms of what are the key skills that we need to hire for when we're looking for a BDR, for an AE, for an account executive. What are the expectations that we want them to be able to achieve? Then how do we onboard them properly? How do we train them to make sure they're delivering? How do we allow them to be promoted and actually grow in their career? And that's what I meant by a funnel. It's just thinking about the journey of an account executive or a BDR the same way I will think through a deal, all the way from before you start recruiting them, all the way by the time you're promoting them, and just basically making sure you have a plan to address every step along the way. That's what I meant. It's just pipeline, basically.
No, I like the comparison, but also I like the thought methodology behind it. Because I think I also tried to kind of ask that question at the beginning, but I think that's also like what I would think is the biggest challenge or has been the biggest challenge for you when you joined Payhawk. Like you have like a big investment that has been done. With that goes like high expectations on you, on the team, on the entire organization. There are so many bottlenecks, so to speak, inside the organization. So of course, mapping everything out I would say that's also like a first step. But then figuring out like what is the first thing to work on. You really prioritizing those things and making it also that it makes sense in terms of sequencing. Of we first gonna work on that, then we're gonna work on onboarding, then we're gonna work on this. Like that to me seemed like the biggest challenge. What you have been experiencing at Payhawk. I don't know. Do you confirm that or?
I mean, yeah, I do. I mean, yes, I think pace was intense, and I think it was key. I mean, we needed to grow as quickly as possible, whatever the cost. So I think that's why when I reflect back on this time, it's just, I think again, just think about it as a pipeline, as a journey, as a funnel, and just make sure you're nailing every step along the way. Well, I think in our case, we just tackle all of that at the same time. That's why, I mean, reflecting is just let's digest that in bits and bulk just to make sure that every step of the process is actually been done and executed properly. But at the end of the day, as you say, expectation, we have numbers to deliver, and that was key at the same time. So it's one thing to build processes, but the eyes is on the price and on the number. I mean, you have a target to hit, you have a number to deliver. So it's just basically juggling between the two, and it's building processes and iterating over time to make sure we have the right process to onboard and support and train our teams while making sure you're delivering the numbers. So yeah, that's just a challenge, but I believe that's a challenge with any VP of sales, building and scaling an organization.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Lovely experiences. Yeah. Maybe you've touched on it, maybe not. So I'm still going to ask a question, but like, if you look back at those 18 months, what would you say like this was by far the biggest learning that I will take on with me forever, but that also might be actually very interesting for the listeners?
Clearly, a lot has happened. I think it would be hard to say that, maybe doing this back again, I would have maybe do it differently or slow down, because I mean the pace was just, it is what it is. I mean, you have to go with the flow. But I think the growth of a sales organization should be driven by the numbers and the performance. A lot of organizations are just thinking about scaling an organization with headcount and quota attainment, and then have to actually grow the team. I think unless and until you start nailing this in a market with a small team, I mean, there's no point in just raising and building the team. I mean, if a team of 2 AEs and 2 BDR can deliver the target, what's the point in just adding more buns on the seat? I mean, yes, maybe you've hired the wrong people and maybe you need to just reset the organization, the team. But I think my biggest advice is make sure you can nail it and prove it with a subset of people in one territory before you start just pushing the pedal and just aggressively just growing the team. Otherwise, you'll end up with a large team in the market where you haven't been able to actually break it through. And then everyone is just underperforming, not hitting the numbers. And I think it's just not the right setup. So growth in terms of headcount in the sales organization should be driven by the performance of the team, specifically when you open new territory. And you should define threshold and expectation. Let's say, by the time we hit 75% of the quota, this is when we're actually growing the team again. And just building that way, while also keeping an eye on the BDR that you want to promote within the region to allow them to actually grow within the organization. So I think growth plan should be led by performance rather than business plan.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I also get where you come from, because I actually read in the press release from back when you raised the Series B that it was clearly said that the ambition was to go from 100 to 300 employees. It was black and white. And then you joined the company. So I can imagine that on the one hand, it was already set in stone. It's something that had to be done. But on the other hand, like maybe it's also a reflection back on you. Like maybe I should have challenged the team at Payhawk. Is that also something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the plan and the vision is bigger than me or bigger than any of us. I mean, the plan is clear and the vision is clear, and we're here to actually deliver. So I think challenging at the time would have been pointless. It's rather a reflection for me now. And I think it's something that we're using that as well. Whenever we are thinking about growing the team in one territory, we now maybe take a time and take a step back and say, is that the right time? Is that the right moment? Is that the right team to be able to actually scale? And rather look at the numbers. I mean, we are very data driven. So I think it is a reflection for me that there should have been a drive at the time. But as you say, it was written. The plan was clear. So it's just a matter of executing.
And let's face it, that brings energy. That ambition,
yeah, exactly.
Goal, knowing that this is something that you have to go through.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
No, yeah, there's no plan B. There's one, just going up.
Exactly. Jérémie, thank you so much for coming on the show, for doing this, for having this very, very interesting conversation. Is there like one last thought that you would like to share with the listeners?
In a sales career, I think anyone needs to basically at some point take some risk. I think the reward is as big as the risk that you're taking in your career. So I think that's my biggest advice for anyone, in a sales career at any level, whether they're BDR or VP. I think taking risk is sometimes frightening, but also rewarding. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to get out of their comfort zone, and the best way to grow is also to challenge yourself sometimes and just, take some risk and go forward. So just I will be advising anyone to, be more bold and take risk.
Love that
when it comes
energy.
to the career.
Be bold. No, for sure. Jérémie, thank you so much. Is there a way that you would like to use this platform for like a call to action for Payhawk? I don't know if you guys are recruiting or if you just want to bring people your way. in terms of, potential prospects or anything like that?
Always recruiting for the most part across all the territory. We have open roles, customer-facing role in sales, customer success, marketing. So please, check payhawk.com for any open roles that may be suitable for you. And if any of you new listeners are within the finance space, finance director, CFO, finance manager, I will encourage them to actually check out the website and basically take a step back to maybe challenge their setup right now. And call, reach out for us for a demo. Would be great.
All right, Jérémie, with that, I thank you so much for coming on the show. Wish you nothing but the best and see you next time.
Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate it for having me on the call. Thank you.
That's it. We've once again reached the end of an episode. I just really appreciate you all spending the time. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And until next week with a fresh new episode.